accessibility. So today's really an informal session just to increase more awareness and provide more information about accessibility, because there's a lot of different misconceptions and thoughts that people have that may not be accurate. So, and there's also a lot of simple ways that you can really boost, your business and increase and enhance accessibility. So, I guess sorry, just give me 1 second. My slide. The slide changed, right, Jen?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, yeah, you're good.
Okay. So just want to briefly introduce our team. So my name is Shant. I'm the accessibility coordinator. We also have 2 other individuals on our team. There's Janice Adshead, who is the deputy city clerk, as well as Sylvia Ingham, who is the access and inclusion clerk. So I guess we'll start by asking the question, what is accessibility? And the truth is that accessibility is a really big word, and it really depends on what your business is to really answer that question. So it varies business to business. Here at the city of Brampton, accessibility means access to services, programs, information, public buildings, facilities, recreation centers. It also means transportation, using Brampton Transit or taxi cabs that are accessible. And it also speaks to employment and opportunities, volunteer opportunities, or any kind of professional opportunity. So it's really a big word, and depending, again, on your business, it will vary a little bit. And I just want to briefly touch upon accessibility legislation, because a lot of people think that accessibility is the right thing to do or the nice thing to do. And even though that may be true, it is actually legislated. So accessibility does fall under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and there are legislative requirements depending on your business that need to be followed. So just wanted to put that out there as well, that we do have certain obligations, and I would encourage you and anyone else you may know who is operating a business to review legislation and make sure that you are kind of meeting those requirements and standards that are required. So I guess I want to start by putting a question out there, which you don't have to answer, but just think about it. What do you know about accessibility? So what comes to your mind when you hear the word accessibility? So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of things that you probably have already thought of, just to give you an idea of where everyone's mind goes when they hear the word accessibility. So you might think of accessible parking. You might think about these ramps that are used by individuals with disabilities. You might think about these push to open power door operator buttons. You might think about accessible washrooms or universal washrooms. Sometimes they're called family washrooms that are designed specifically for individuals with disabilities. You might also be thinking of lowered counters. You may have seen this at the bank or even at the airlines, hotels. Sorry, I meant airport. At the airline desk, you might see these kind of desks there. So these are kind of the first thoughts that people have when it comes to accessibility. And all of these things are very important. And if your business has the opportunity to provide these elements, they really should be incorporated. But today I want to talk a little bit beyond these items. I think these are things that we all are aware of, we all know about, but there's definitely much more than that. So what can you do? How can you help? How can you elevate and enhance accessibility? So the first thing that I'm going to kind of say, which is, pretty much the most basic, simplest thing that you can do, is use the right terminology. I don't want to use this word, but I will use it just to illustrate what I'm trying to say. When you think about a parking spot that has that wheelchair symbol or that door that opens automatically, we don't want to use the word handicapped. It's not appropriate, it's offensive, and it's really been a term that's been phased out. So whenever you refer to these elements, try to use the word, or not try, use the word accessible, because that's the correct term to use. So accessible parking space, accessible door opener, accessible washroom. I actually saw a TV show recently. I don't know if you guys watch it, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, one of my favorite shows. And I was very taken aback because they actually used the word handicap, and it was, a current season, current episode. So we have to kind of fight that stigma and that word. Another thing that I'll mention is we also have to be careful how we refer to individuals with disabilities. So here at the city of Brampton, you may have heard me say it already, we say individuals with disabilities. We don't say disabled people or someone suffering with a disability. It's not our position or our right to decide who is suffering or any of that kind of stuff. So it's always best to just say individual with disability or a person with a disability. It's much more respectful and it doesn't have a negative connotation to it. So language is very, very important. Not only when someone, you're dealing with someone face to face, but also if you have social media, if you have a Facebook page, whatever way you use to communicate with your customers, it's very important to incorporate that language into your business and to your customers. If you have a physical store that people are coming to, it's very important to clear the aisles. So sometimes a lot of shops have the right width, but there's always things in the aisles that are poking out or from the overhead. It could be a random item on the floor. This is a very, very small thing that if we can just do, it really provides more opportunities for people to come to your business. So just be mindful of that. If you have a lot of high traffic, maybe every now and then take a look, make sure nothing has fallen over, because not everybody has the ability to pick it up and put it away. So it's just something, very, very simple thing that could be done quite easily, just by being a little bit more mindful and paying a little bit more attention. I also want to talk about lighting and contrast. So I'm sure you've all heard of the store, I think it's Hollister, where it looks like you're going into a cave. So that's actually not an accessible store because a lot of people would not be able to see anything in that kind of setting. So just be careful of your lighting. You want things to be illuminated appropriately. So if someone with vision issues or low vision or color blindness comes in, they need to be able to see your store. And if you want the dim lighting and all that, another option is if you see someone coming, ask them, do you need this to be brighter? Should I turn this on for you? That way you kind of have both options. So that's just something to keep in mind as well as contrast. So if you have a physical store and everything is the same color, that might be a problem for certain people. They might not be able to see certain things. So if everything is beige, if everything is gray, if everything is red, they really won't be able to differentiate certain items. So just make sure that you have some color contrast. There's great resources online, which I'll get to later, that can kind of help you with that as well. And color contrast also goes beyond physical spaces. So color contrast is also applicable to your website, to your social media. What kind of graphics are you using? Do you have posters? Do you have flyers? Using the right colors are very, very important. Another aspect to keep in mind is, and this is more so again if you have a physical store, important items need to be within reach. So I'm talking about Interact machines, I'm talking about hand sanitizer. If they're in a fixed position, you're really not allowing for flexibility, because if it's too high up, someone may not be able to reach it. If it's too low, someone may not be able to bend down that far. So just being mindful of that, or you could maybe place it in two different heights. or those interact machines that have a wire where you can kind of maneuver it the way you want. That would be the preference. So if there's anything in your store that needs to have contact with the person, just make sure to include a little bit of flexibility within that. So we always run into this question, which is, what if something can't be fixed? So I know I'm talking a little bit more about physical spaces. So let's say you have a washroom and you want it to be accessible, but you just can't because it's an older building, or maybe it was built a very long time ago, and at that time there were no accessibility standards. So what happens in those kind of scenarios is we should always aim to make sure that we meet current standards as much as possible. So you would have to hire the right consultant who would work on that washroom and bring it to code as much as possible. At the same time, we know with older buildings, it's a challenge, it's tough. There might be certain barriers, itself in providing that. So not to say that that's okay, but we acknowledge and recognize that that could be an issue or a hindrance on providing something accessible. A lot of old stores have that one step up to the door as well. So what we say to that is think of other options, right? Like if someone can't get to your store, if you don't have something that someone needs, what is another way you can serve them? So that's like one good thing that's come out of COVID, which is this whole idea of curbside service, online service. There's different avenues to explore. We really don't recommend just saying no or just saying this is not available. So that's really not the right approach. So, if you are in a situation where something can't be done, think of other options. And one of the easiest way to think of an option is just to ask the person. It's really that simple. You can ask them, what do you prefer? What can we do? It doesn't need to be a decision only on your end. You can have that conversation and open discussion. And as long as you're incorporating that person in your final decision or whatever it is that you come up with, that's perfectly acceptable. So just keep that in mind as well. So I know we've talked a lot about physical spaces, but I just want to shift gears and talk about information. And when I say information, I'm referring to a lot of different things. So I'm talking about websites, apps, social media, flyers, posters, any kind of public information that you are producing. It has to follow certain requirements. It has to follow certain guidelines. So, web accessibility is a thing, and it does have fairly comprehensive requirements. So it's important, if you have a website that's being managed by a company, it's important to know if their website is accessible, because some people actually use screen readers. It's usually people with low vision or blindness. They use a screen reader that reads out information to them. You have to make sure your website is compatible with those kind of softwares. Otherwise, they're never going to read it. They're never going to get that information. And if you don't have a website and you're on social media like Facebook, I know they're being renamed. We've heard that on the news. But for now, they're called Facebook. So they also have accessibility features within Facebook. So just taking some time to learn about those features. Same with Instagram, same with Twitter, it's all there. So just maximize all of the tools that are available to you. All of the social networks most of them have some degree of accessibility. Now on Instagram, it's more of a visual. It's all about pictures and stories. And Instagram stories are unfortunately not accessible. But if you're posting something, if you just include a description of your picture of what you're posting, that actually elevates accessibility. So sometimes it's just simple things like that. And I like to point everyone to this resource. So the CNIB, the Canadian National Institute of the Blind, is a good resource for incorporating accessibility guidelines, whether you're printing something, whether it's a document, or whether it's online. this is a really good resource. This is a good starting point. So, and it's very easy to follow, very easy to read. They talk about colors and fonts and just things you need to be a little mindful of. So if you haven't been doing this, this is definitely the right place to start. So just if you want to make a note of this, this is definitely a good resource. It has been a foundation in our standards. So a lot of the things that we do at the city come from these guidelines. So it's definitely a good resource. And you can also actually always pick up the phone and talk to them too. You'll get a specialist and they can guide you. They can answer some of those questions. And it's always a good idea to consult with these kinds of companies or corporations or organizations. There's also the Rick Hansen Foundation. These are good places to go for information. I also want to talk a little bit about alternate format. So basically what alternate format is it's actually a concept. So it actually refers to providing information to individuals the way that they want. So what I find here at the City of Brampton is we can follow accessibility to the T. We can hit all our check marks. We can do everything the way it is supposed to be done. It still might not be accessible to certain people. So we need to have that open mind. We need to understand and recognize that there's no formula for this. You can do everything correctly and it still might not work for someone. So you always have to be open to providing a different format. And I'll give an example to kind of illustrate what I'm saying. So for example, this is a Zoom meeting. Maybe this format doesn't work for someone. So someone could email us and say, I want a written version, or I just want the audio. I don't want to see anything. So it really depends on the person and their needs. And we have to be open-minded to these kinds of requests. We have this on our website. It's on the accessibility page. Anyone is able to request any document, anything that the City of Brampton publishes. All residents and visitors to our website can request an alternate format. And we encourage businesses to follow that as well. I also want to talk about accessible customer service, because that is also extremely important as well. So like I was saying before, you need to have the right mindset. You need to be open-minded. You need to think of other options. Sometimes you need to be creative. I just don't like seeing situations where we just say no and we don't try. It's really about going that extra mile. And I know I already said this before, but sometimes it's honestly just a simple conversation that needs to happen with that person, because they will tell you what they need and how they need it. So keep that in mind. A lot of organizations and businesses actually provide the opportunity to provide feedback on their website. So if you ever want to look at our website, it's brampton.ca/accessibility. You can see we have a link there that anyone can provide feedback and we follow up and take it from there. So just incorporating those avenues is also important. You also should welcome support persons. So sometimes people need the assistant of their family member or friend, and these people should be welcomed into the facility, into your business. If you're dealing with them digitally or electronically, you know, they might tell you that they are supporting someone with a disability. They need to be treated like one person, essentially. You don't want to get into a situation where you're only talking to the individual with a disability and not acknowledging that there's a support person, or not allowing the support person to interject or contribute to that conversation. We should always start by speaking to the individual with the disability first. If they prefer that the other person speaks for them, they will let you know in most situations. We just don't recommend saying, I only have to talk to you and I can't talk to this person. And this is a legislative requirement. So it's not something that's a nice to do kind of thing, it's required. And the same goes for service animals. Service animals are it's a little bit complicated if you actually read the legislation. But simply put, service animals are allowed in most places. I think if it's like a food kind of restaurant or something, there might be different rules there. So you may have to look into that. But for the most part, they are welcomed and allowed everywhere. And we are able to ask the person to produce a document that it has to be signed by a physician that can verify that this is a service animal, because I think there's been a couple of cases where people have purchased their own service animal vest and put it on their dog or whatever animal they might use. And then, so it's not an actual service animal, but because you see the vest, you might think it is. So, if there's ever any need to verify that, you can always ask the person and they can produce a document. It has to be signed by a physician. And again, this is another thing that is legislated as well. So here's an example. The service animals, they actually perform a number of tasks. So they can open doors, they can push power door buttons. They're an essential part to the movement and maneuverability for certain people. They might not be able to get around certain places without their service animal, so they also need to be welcomed. I also want to talk about employment. And this is kind of a big one for me because it's still something that we haven't normalized, which I really think we need more progression on. So I think it's important to think about your business, think about what you do, and offer opportunities to individuals with disabilities. I don't know if anyone has had a similar experience, but I remember back in the day when you can actually go to a movie theater, I remember that sometimes the tickets get scanned and it's by a person in a wheelchair, an individual with a disability. And I think that's great to provide them that opportunity. So I think we need to see more of that. We need to see individuals with disabilities in the workforce, because a lot of them are quite capable of working and contributing to an organization or a company. And I think this whole thing about remote work or working remotely has really elevated this. So that's another kind of good thing that's come out of COVID. But yeah, providing more of these kinds of opportunities in your office, in your business, if there's a job out there that you have that can be performed by someone with a disability, there's no reason why they shouldn't be hired. It shouldn't be looked at as, I don't know if they could do the job, or I don't know if this is a good idea. It's really not the right mindset. Of course, it depends on the job, and there's also a number of other factors that go into play here. But like I said, if there's an opportunity out there and it can be done, I think we should offer a little bit more of those opportunities. As well as another thing I'd like to kind of highlight is the aspect of training. So training is very, very important. Depending on your organization, it may be required. So I think there's a certain number of employees. If you have more employees, then you have to provide accessibility training. We recently launched our training this year, earlier this year, I think in the summer. It's good to train your employees so they know what to be aware of, what is legislation, what are the requirements. Investing in your employees to be trained about accessibility is very important, because I have seen so many people, I'm talking grocery stores, banks, I go there and people never know what to do when someone with a disability comes in. And it really shouldn't be like that. There shouldn't be a fear, there shouldn't be worry. No one should feel anxious assisting someone with a disability. And this is where training comes in. And you'd be surprised how readily available such training programs are. It's literally a Google search away. There's so many videos on YouTube. There's really a lot of things out there that we can do to provide training, to provide more awareness so that people are more prepared for those kind of situations. I've had someone from one of my departments share those kinds of anxiety or hesitation. Oh, I don't know how to approach this person, or I don't know how to, deal with this kind of potential situation where someone with a disability might walk in. And it really shouldn't be any different than someone else walking in. Of course, we need to be a little bit more mindful. We need to be we might have to adjust certain ways that we communicate, but there really shouldn't be a difference. And like I said, most of your interaction and most of how you're going to communicate with that person comes from asking them. So that's a very important point. We also sometimes see, someone in a wheelchair and people just go up and they move that person themselves. It's not really appropriate. It's always important to ask. And I know I've said that a few times because it's such a simple thing that gets missed. So whether you are serving someone, whether you're trying to help someone, whether you want to, assist in some way, we should always ask. We should always start by asking before doing anything. It's also important to not leave people that you're assisting in awkward positions, like in the middle of a hallway or something. We always have to be mindful of the person's dignity and making sure that they're always in a safe location. Even if they're waiting for something, they need to be safe. So that also ties into the next point here that I have feedback, which I already kind of spoke about. If you have customers with disabilities, just engage with them, ask them, what can we do better? How can we help? Again, really, really simple things that can enhance your business and your interactions with any customers that you may have who may have a disability. I also want to highlight notice of disruption. So this is also a legislative requirement. So if there is something in your business that's not available, so let's say your website is down, your cart checkout, if you sell things online, is not working, or let's say your physical store has a leak or an outage or a flood, you need to make customers aware of that. They should know about that before they come there. We do this a lot with construction around the city. So if there are certain sidewalks that are blocked, we like to notify people because they have to plan their day. And when you're using a wheelchair or an assistive device, it takes a little bit of planning to get around. And we want to make sure that our bus stops and bus stations and all of that stuff is available and accessible. But this also applies to other things. So if there's any aspect of your business, if there's an outage of some sort or any kind of delay, it's understandable, stuff happens, but just make sure you let people know. Put it on social media, put a notice on your actual door if you have a physical space. Just communicating what's going on is very, very important. So I've covered a lot of information. I know I've talked about a lot of different topics. I just want to open the floor if there's any questions or if anyone has anything they want to ask.
Thank you so much. That was lots of wonderful content. I think for me, when we opened our space at 41 George, we had the ability to work with your team, and I was really blown away by so many things that most people would overlook. So a great example is like color choices, to ensure that there was proper contrast between the color of the carpet that we had selected and some of the dividing walls that we had in this space. So my eyes were opened wide when I went through the process, because there were a lot of things that I just simply was unaware of. And for me, I was grateful that we had the ability to work with experts to ensure that our space was welcoming and accessible to everyone. The other thing I put in the chat is, if you do get a chance, Mark Wafer is a gentleman that I had an opportunity to hear him speak at a conference a number of years ago, and he's the owner of a number of Tim Hortons franchise restaurants all across Canada. And I believe him and his wife have hired almost 200 workers with disabilities in meaningful and very competitively paid positions.
Wow.
And he has seen incredible success, and he sees that there is a clear and compelling case for every business owner to really look at inclusion when they're hiring. So I strongly recommend just looking him up online. I know some of his talks are available through various YouTube links, and it's just a really beautiful story that he shares about some of his experiences in hiring those with disabilities. So definitely worth looking into. And if I ever had a chance, I would love to have him come and speak at a Brampton event.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love hearing stories like this because I feel like we need more people like that.
Agreed.
And I recently myself went into a bank and I saw that they had a workstation for someone with a disability, and I was just, and it might be because of my field and working in accessibility, but I went right up to that person and I said, I want you to help me. It's very, very moving when you see someone get those opportunities, because it's not an easy process and they have so many barriers that they need to go through just to get those opportunities.
100%. 100%. I think it's also important, like some of the great things that the city is doing is through your accessibility awards program. And I would love to see more businesses being nominated in the business category. And, for the community to really step up and nominate businesses that you see out in the community that are doing things with keeping accessibility in mind and recognizing and celebrating those businesses. So I'm hoping that you'll continue to run that award program, and next year we can look at nominating more businesses in our community to receive recognition for their efforts.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, we started that a few years ago, and COVID threw us a little bit of a curveball, but we did get the awards up and running this year. There were some restrictions because of public health, but I'm really hoping that next year we go all out with our celebrations.
Agreed.
Yeah, and that's usually just to put it out there, usually we announce the winner sometime in May, and there's an event in June. So most of the information and nomination process, it would start around January.
Perfect. Well, we're definitely on board to making sure that the business community is aware of it, so that we can really, like I said, celebrate those businesses that are kind of exceeding the standards. So.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I see somebody else jumped off. I'll just give it a minute or so. But as I said, we will be recording the session so that you can obviously watch it again. And I know there's been a few people that have connected and are watching the live stream of this webinar. So if there are no...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, if anything comes up later, anyone wants to reach out to the accessibility team, just email us at accessibility@brampton.ca, and we'll definitely follow up with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for hopping on or connecting through our live stream. We greatly appreciate your participation on this really important topic. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Feel free to reach out to myself or the accessibility team. My email is in the chat, jennifer.vivian@brampton.ca. So I wish everyone a wonderful day. And thank you so much, Shant. It was a really great presentation, great visuals. So appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.